Early. So this is a pretty heavy definition to read. I don't know. Are you guys feeling pretty good about that? Do you guys understand it at all? Yeah, it's quite a bit to take in, but I figure I should tackle, even though I started with a definition, I'll tackle maybe a little bit about what graphic design is, just to start with. So a little bit about what I do every day. As my intro stated, I'm an illustrator. I'm a interdisciplinary designer. That's sort of a subsect of graphic design. Graphic design, subsequently, it's a huge thing. It's a very large subject to tackle. There's a lot of industries that use graphic design. I mean, well, every industry uses graphic design. It's literally everywhere. The example I gave yesterday was, it was likely a graphic designer who designed the pattern on this carpet, as lovely as it is. The exit sign, originally designed by a graphic designer, right? So your T-shirts that have graphics on them. So that's just a small sampling of how large of a beast graphic design is and why it's kind of hard to define. So what I do every day is I get up, I check my emails. I'm a self-employed graphic designer, which is very different from being hired by a company. There's a lot of options, a lot of opportunities as a graphic designer in terms of what direction you could go in. You could be hired by a large company to be an in-house designer. Starbucks has a fantastic in-house design team that they work only out of Seattle, I think, for the most part, and Minneapolis, actually. I think there's a team there. So that would be an in-house graphic designer where you're essentially just working on a large company's stuff. There's studios, smaller studios, boutique studios that do really niche projects. I worked at a studio that did a lot of designs for stamps for Canada Post. And then there's self-employment, the self-employment route, which is eventually where I settled on. And as a self-employed graphic designer, there's no real ceiling on what you can make, but that is that's a little bit misleading in the sense that you have to work really hard to make a lot of money, and you need to know a lot about business as well. So you have to have your feet planted very, very solidly in two different types of industries there, right? So you want to get a commerce degree maybe first, or know a little bit more about being a business person before you take the route that I've taken. So anyways, what I do on a daily basis is essentially I meet with clients. We have strategic meetings where I try to figure out what they want me to do for them. We try to plan out what the best course of action is, what mediums to communicate through, whether that's through print, whether that's on the web, whether they need an application. There's a lot of different things that I do, a lot of different ways for me to solve problems for clients. So these are the things that I've been doing for the last 18 years, and I continue to do them today. So some examples of graphic design, other than the carpet and the exit sign. Logos. I'm sure you all were expecting this, right? This is a form of graphic design. So is this, right? This is graphic design. Labels, food labels, beer labels, signage. I'm sure you're all familiar with this one. Designing signs for, to attract people in, but also designing signs that inform and tell people where to go. Interface design for the web, for electronic media. This is graphic design. You know what this is. Yeah. This is graphic design, right? Album covers. This is graphic design, unfortunately. This is also graphic design. So this is actually just the homepage. I just took this snap this morning, but I didn't touch on this on my talk yesterday, and I kind of wanted to bring this up as well. This is graphic design as well. So this is an interesting one. What's the connection between all those? Anybody want to take a stab at it? they all communicate something, right? They're all trying to communicate something. That's what graphic design does. It's about communication. So that last example, this example, what's important about that is that so as designers, we can also affect change. Not only do we just sell things for people or motivate people to buy, because that's probably a better way of describing that. What we can do is we can motivate people to take action, right? That's probably a more altruistic way of saying it, but we can communicate all kinds of things. What we choose to communicate is really up to our own personal values and who we want to work for and what we want to do. But as graphic designers, we have an opportunity to affect change in all kinds of ways and in all kinds of industries for all kinds of organizations. We're not artists. This is something that a lot of people don't understand. We use art. We can use art. Art is important, right? But there's a big difference between art and graphic design. Who wants to take a stab at defining art?
There's no limitations.
There's no limitations. That's a good one. Anybody else? Art is self-expression, right? Art is a way of expressing something that you care about, something that you're feeling, and it's something that you want somebody else to feel as well. So whatever your medium is, if it's paint, if it's sculpture, if it's dance, if it's music, that's art, because what you're doing is you're expressing a feeling. You're trying to communicate an emotion. You do that in graphic design as well, but not for yourself. You do that generally for somebody else, right? So it's not self-expression. It's expression for the purpose of motivating, right? So why do we need graphic design? And this is the big differentiator. So design is it's purposeful, right? Art isn't always purposeful, but that's okay. It's usually pleasurable, right? So, well, maybe that's a purpose unto itself. But it's goal oriented, right? So you have a client that you're working with and they have a goal that they want you to help them achieve. And generally that goal involves you helping them to communicate to an audience what it is that they're selling, what services they provide, who they're trying to help. It initiates, it motivates. I think I touched on this a little bit already. So what we do is we drive people into action. We focus on what's called a call to action very often. Maybe you've heard the term before. It simplifies, clarifies, identifies, right? So what that means essentially is that it helps take very complex ideas and simplify them, boil them down into an image, perhaps, an infographic, something that people can understand immediately, very quickly. It cuts through the clutter, right? Because there's we get so much bombarded by so much information. That's partially the fault of graphic designers, but we're also a really populous world right now. And there's a lot of people who need to make a living and a lot of people who are screaming for your attention and screaming for your dollars, screaming for your energy, if they need you to volunteer for them. So what this does, it helps you. Good graphic design should cut through that and should speak directly to you. So everybody has their own opinions, has their own ideas, things that resonate with them. As graphic designers, we learn how to connect the organization with their target audience, how to create a message that resonates with a specific person and cuts through the clutter for them and allows them to come to whatever it is that organization is hoping they will come to. Very important point, good design adds value, right? So you can take a small business that maybe isn't very visible, maybe isn't very credible, and you can help them punch high, above their weight. It's sort of a boxing term, right? Where you've got a small guy up against a big guy, and they punch a lot harder than you expected them to, right? So what good design does is, with the introduction of the web and web marketing, there are a lot of small businesses who can look extremely credible online if you use good design, right? It makes the difference between trusting somebody and not trusting somebody sometimes. I'm sure you've all been to a website where they're trying to sell you something, and you're like, there's no way I'm buying from these guys. They're just going to start sending me spam and whatever. That same company can use a graphic designer to help them craft a far more credible message, something that looks like it's a little more trustworthy, and it's just a sense of quality that you get. I'm sure you all sort of understand what that means. So this is a graphic that I put together that explains a little bit about branding. I'm sure you're all familiar with the term. You guys know branding. Does anybody want to take a stab at what branding is? What a brand is? What do you think of? First thing you think of when you think of a brand? Logo? Right? A lot of people think of logos. It's a little bit more than that, right? So a brand is, the logo is generally, it's what I like to refer to it as a flag that people can rally under, right? So the brand itself is essentially, it's the culture, it's what you feel about a product when you're not using it or when you are using it. So it's how it connects to your emotions. So it's really easy to talk about the specifications of things, right? So the bullet points, the if you want to talk about an Xbox versus a PlayStation, you look at the specs. But I mean, there's other things too, PC versus Mac, right? There's a lot of examples where emotion drives your decision to buy one thing or the other. If you are tied to a brand, you love that brand and you fight for that brand and you argue with your friends when they feel something differently about a different brand. So what makes you feel that way, what partially helps you come to that sensation, that feeling, is essentially it's working, it's using the item, and it's becoming familiar with it. But what motivates you to buy it in the first place is the communications, right? You have to know about them. You have to understand where they come from. So what we do is we connect the hearts. We don't necessarily connect the minds, right? We want you to feel an emotion about something that's going to drive you. That's, again, it's going to initiate an action. So what do graphic designers really concern themselves with on a regular basis? Well, we want to understand the audience, what their wants, what their needs are. We also want to understand the organization, right? How are we going to fulfill that need? And how are we making sure that we constantly fulfill that need and that people are satisfied? We want to know what they're trying to do in order to do that, because we need to communicate that for them. Methods of communication are really important to graphic designers. So knowing a little bit about print, knowing a little bit about television, mobile phones. Can anybody name some methods of communication that they might think of, right? Like something that maybe nobody's thinking about right now, but not an obvious one. Phone book, yeah. That's a method. Yeah, there are lots of methods of communication. There are a lot of ways to to talk to people, whether it's in print, whether it's on the web, whether it's through your mobile phone, on an app. There's a lot of different ways to communicate with people. And of course, production processes, right? The tools. How many of you are familiar with Photoshop? Show of hands. Yeah, a lot of you are. So there's a sort of common misconception that, if you just learn Photoshop, that you can be a graphic designer. If you know the tool really well, that's a good thing, but that's not all it takes, right? Graphic design is actually there's a degree program for graphic design. So if you want to be, there is a difference between being a production designer and a graphic designer. I won't get into that, but to be a real graphic designer, generally it requires some school. So there's an elective out of the U of M. It's called design. It's in the Faculty of Fine Arts. There's Red River programs that you can take. There's programs all across the country. There's a Master's of Design that you can get. You can get a Bachelor of Design. Do you have to get those things? Not necessarily, but they definitely do make you a better strategic thinker. So production tools aren't the only thing that's required. It's all these other things as well. So how do you know you might be a good designer, right? What are some traits of a good designer? Well, if you like to be organized, if you like to, stack things just so, like for me personally, I like to make sure that, small dishes are stacked with small dishes, large dishes are stacked with large dishes, just being really well organized. And you like things, it's not just being organized for the sake of ease of use, although the function of it is a good thing. It's also you like how it looks, it's aesthetically pleasing to you. If you have excellent written and oral communication, that's obviously very important to pretty much everything in the world, but being able to communicate extremely well. If you're already a very strong communicator, that is a really good skill to be bringing into graphic design. Some designers like to collect things. It's a strange sort of trait that a lot of designers share, is they collect things like old cameras for some reason. That's a really popular one, or magazines, books that are visually interesting, rocks, stamps. If you're a collector of some kind, sometimes that tends to serve you well as a graphic designer, because you're learning from that aesthetic. If you pay attention to details, some of you probably have friends, or some of you are probably like this, where you have a lot of other people will glaze over things that you notice, or you have a friend who will see the beauty in the smallest thing that somebody else or most people won't see. If that's you, then that's a good trait to bring into graphic design. If you are interested in painting, sketching, sculpting, you exercise like a sense of aesthetic. If you've always done that and you continue to do that, then you might be a good designer as well. And another really, really important one is problem solving. If you can connect ideas to solve problems, that's a really important skill to bring in. Now, you don't have to have all these traits. You don't necessarily even have to have any of them. But if some of these are things that you can identify with, then maybe graphic design is a good choice for you. First and foremost, if you want to be creative, if you want to make something new, something that's different, take ideas from other places and put them together to make something interesting and new that people haven't necessarily seen before. If you have creative ideas all the time, if you're making people laugh, right? Being creative is at the heart of being a graphic designer. It's finding clever, interesting ways to communicate with people that, again, is going to rise above the rest of that noise. So where do you go to get more information on becoming a graphic designer? This is a really great place to start. GDC.net is this is the organization that I'm a part of. I'm as my intro stated, I'm the business development chair for the Graphic Society. It's a mouthful. The Society of Graphic Designers of Canada, and so this is a good place to go if you're looking for schools that you may want to attend across Canada. If you want to find a mentor, somebody you want to talk to, if you'd like to visit a design studio, we're really friendly people. We're always happy to bring in anyone who's interested in seeing how we work. So you can call one of the studios up and ask if you can take a tour, maybe shadow somebody for a day. That's always a good way to sort of get a really good sense of how the industry works and what your day-to-day could look like as a graphic designer. GDC.net if you're looking.